So Socrates was the mentor of Plato, as mentioned. He was born in Athens around sort of 470 BC, and he died in about 399 BC. I mean, the precise date of his birth isn't known. He is believed to have been a stonecutter. His dad was a sculptor. His mum was a midwife, and he also devoted a lot of time to philosophy. As a master stonecutter, I mean, we can assume he's probably fairly well off, even though he had a tendency to go around in rags and do various odd things. One of the things about Socrates, as you can tell, I mean, I'm not saying many absolutes in terms of when he was born or stuff, is there's not actually anything written by Socrates himself. All we know of Socrates is through his two students, Plato and Xenophon, who wrote a lot, and there are a few other students as well, like Critias, but Plato and Xenophon were sort of the two main guys who wrote about him. Now, Plato's writings of Socrates tend to be kind of, they're reckoned to be quite far from the truth, because Plato is very creative and he only expressed himself through the character of Socrates. Xenophon's are reckoned to be slightly more accurate. Xenophon was sort of a pretty badass Greek general who ended up his leader was killed on a campaign in Persia, and he ended up having to march back home from Persia with 10,000 men back to Greece. So yeah, he was pretty down-to-earth kind of guy who wrote one of the original economic treatises called the Economikos. Anyway, so these two students are how we get our impression of Socrates, and sort of the impression we get is sort of this guy who asked a lot of awkward questions. I mean, he died in 399, but he didn't die peacefully. He was poisoned by the people of Athens. He was made to drink hemlock after being tried. So kind of the sort of questions Socrates was asking was sort of what's known as the Socratic method. Now, he would ask sort of leading questions to try to get to an answer or to prove people's ignorance, and of course people, especially rich and powerful people, don't like being made to look stupid. So one of the things that Socrates is most famous for is being told by the Oracle of Delphi that he's the wisest man in Athens. Now, the Oracle of Delphi was sort of this mystic girl in a Greek temple who was reputed to have insight into the wisdom of the gods, and she tends to say very cryptic things, and Socrates being told he was the wisest man in Athens, he decided, he was like, well, how can this be, because I know nothing? But he asked a lot of questions to a lot of important people, and he realised that they also didn't know very much either. So he, by knowing that he didn't know very much, was smarter than the people who didn't know very much but thought they knew things. As you can imagine, sort of going about this way, being a gadfly, as Plato terms it, which is like a horsefly that leaves very big bite marks in ancient Greece and is very annoying, is not the best way to endear yourself to people. And Socrates was put on trial, accused of corrupting the youth and of not believing in the city gods. Oh, well, that's quite sad for Socrates. With regard to whether he did corrupt the youth, I mean, he did teach a lot of the youth of Athens, including several of the 30 tyrants, the unpopular government which were put in power by Sparta after it was beaten by Athens. And his ideas sort of were quite... they challenged old assumptions, and in a hierarchical society that's obviously dangerous. So I've portrayed Socrates as a sort of slightly odd mystic figure, and I think it's kind of important that it is recognised that he's not a super... The Greeks aren't entirely like modern rational scientific man. Socrates claimed to hear voices at times in Plato's dialogues, and not just the voices of the other characters, but voices from somewhere else. So he's a bit of an odd one. But the Socratic method, this idea of asking a lot of questions, his basic epistemological skepticism, he doesn't know very much, but he knows he doesn't know very much, and we can't know all that much. And his death at the hands of Athens for corrupting the youth all make him one of the more interesting of the early Greek philosophers.